Okay, so we're going to continue our demos and tutorials on material design components, in particular the stepper component. And so we're going to notice we're using Angular 10, Material Design 10. And if we go to components, we see our components documentation, and let's see, we're going to look at the stepper. And we already discussed that the stepper is this wizard-like workflow dividing content into logical steps, and it's used for like questionnaires in Angular applications. So let's take a look at the next example that we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss a stepper with editable steps. This is once again a stepper component out of the box, which gives us some functionality. And you'll see as we go through this particular demo that the icons state and the icon views are changing as we go through our stepper, and we have this button called Enable Edit Mode. So right now, Edit Mode it doesn't appear to be enabled. So let's go through the example. So the material design stepper consists of different steps. Each step supposedly has a form, and the form could be validated as you navigate from one step to the other. And in this particular case, there's different features of the form which the stepper can give you, and we're going to just demonstrate the editable mode feature. Okay, so now here's the first step. It says fill in your name. Here's the step. It's label number 1. It's highlighted as blue. It's active. So I click next. I type in the information. Notice the asterisk here says it's required. And I go to the next screen, and notice that the first step turned into a different icon. The state of that step for the first step is now done, complete. The icon shows a check mark. Out of the box, it shows it. And so now I am, I want to go back and say, wait a minute, I didn't capitalize my first name. I can't go back because my edit mode is disabled. So I'm forced to continue. And move forward. And now the second step is marked as complete. Well, it would appear that the first step, I typed in my name, it was valid, the name was required, it was valid, I typed it in, it's complete, the icon state says check. Go to the second step, fill out your address, I did that, and now I'm here, I'm at this step. And what I usually do is I might have a submit button here where I call a web service to persist the data. But I can't go back to the form now of the second step and change my address because you know I meant to put a capital letter there and I didn't do it, whatever. And I can't really do that. So if I reset the form now, and I don't really have to do that, but I could dynamically set the enable edit mode on the stepper, and when I do that, then I'm capable of navigating, submitting the first form, navigating to the second step. I'm looking at the second form, but now my icon here by default shows me the fact that I could edit the first step again. So I go back to the first step and now I can edit it. I go back and I see, oh, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted uppercase letters here. Now I fill out my address. I go to next, and once again I'm at the third step here, and notice it's highlighted, and the number, the state indicates, since it shows a numerical value there, it shows that that is my active tab. And I could go back, since this icon is edit, the state, it says it's editable, the stepper is in editable mode, I could go back and edit this and say, you know what, I forgot to put a capital letter here, and so now I'm going to go to next. Now, it is true that I could be here, even though this is editable the first step, I could disable edit mode and this goes to done, and now I can't go back here. So it's very dynamic, and I'm just demonstrating a simple characteristic of the form. Notice the animation that occurs when I click on here that we are using in the module, and now I could use the keyboards to navigate if I wanted to through the tabs, and there's some accessibility options I could have as well. So let's just very quickly look at the code and just see what is the big difference here in editable mode. And once again, if I look at the application, I got the angular.json file. I don't think anything's going to be too different with that. Describes my applications and my configurations of my bills and stuff like that. And then I got the package.json file, which basically shows me my commands and my versions of Angular I'm using, which packages I'm using. There's the tsconfig, which shows my TypeScript compiler options. And then if I go into the source code, loosely speaking, if you go into the angular.json file, you'll see that it's pointing to a main module of my application is main.ts. So if I look at main.ts, it is my application module. So the angular.json file says, okay, this is my app module. This is the thing that should boot up and boot up the root component. The root component is down here. This is called stepper editable example. The root component is stepper editable example TypeScript file, and my application module is using all of these modules here in the application. It's providing those things to the components to use, and once again I have a demo material module here which gives me all the material design components, and I've got my browser animation module and things that my browser might need, and I got my forms module, which is really important because each one of these steps is a form, and I'm going to be using a form module, and in fact I use a reactive forms module, and I list the stepper editable example as the entry components and bootstrapping, and then I use this injection token to inject this options that I set for the form fields, etc. And what we talked about was the ability to change the look and feel of the form fields just by injecting this token and using a certain appearance value. Okay, and then we bootstrap the app module, and the app module bootstraps the Angular component. So basically, in the index.html, we do have a custom HTML tag, which is my root component, and my root component is here, and the root component, once again, we discussed the first overview example, but to go through this again, it's a class which has an initializer, and the constructor puts a reference of the form builder into the object instance after it's created, the attributes first form, second form, and is editable are part of the object instance when it gets created, and the ng on init sets the state of the first form by taking a form builder, creating a group of controls with initial values and validators, and defining the state of the first form group for the first step, second form group for the second step, and then is editable false, set to false here in the object instance when it gets created. So you hit on the index.html, the Angular app runs the root component, gets instantiated, and then this ng on init happens after the object gets created. It initializes, the template renders, and what happens is we wind up using the mat horizontal stepper in the markup fragment inside the index.html to render this component with this functionality, which is a beautiful thing, right? Because what we get out of the box is a material design styled a questionnaire type of component with functionality that's managed properly, lifecycle managed, stepping through, backing up. The workflow is managed, and all we have to worry about is what we want to do with the data model when we submit or finish whatever we're trying to accomplish here. Okay, so we have one button. We talked about there's a button on top that has Enable Edit Mode, and okay, so the first part of the markup fragment has a button, and the button has Enable Edit Mode, and there's a click event here on this button, which is a mat raise button, which toggles the is editable value in the object instance. So in this particular situation, you're negating is editable, which means it's either enabled, disabled, enabled, disabled. You're toggling the value in the object instance. When you do that, what you're displaying is defined by this interpolation operator. The double brackets is an interpolation operator in template, and what it does is it uses this ternary operator to say, is editable true? If is editable true, or let's say if is editable is false, then negating it would be true. So if it's true, then you show enable edit mode. If it's false, show disable edit mode. So that's why when you click on this button, it's just looking at the value in the object instance and switching the label. Okay, simple, but yet still confusing. Then we have this material design mat horizontal stepper, which says that it's linear. Okay, so this directive here says it's linear, and then there's a reference to the stepper component itself. So when I reset the stepper down below, I use the stepper to say reset, and the reset button at the end of my stepper can work in conjunction with the mat horizontal stepper to initialize the forms and return back to the first step. So this hash symbol is just a reference to this stepper object, and my reset is using that stepper reference variable to tell the mat horizontal stepper back up to the first step, reset the form values, I want to start over. Okay, so let's move forward. You got one step here. The first step here basically has a step control as the first form control group, which means this step has a form group associated with it. The form has some fields, and the form group basically has some form controls, and those values are going to be mapped with the embedded form of this step. But the mat step is part of the mat horizontal stepper. So the mat step is defining, first of all, it's pointing to the first form control group, but then what it's doing also is saying it's mapping the editable attribute of the step to is editable value in the component attribute is editable object instance. So this is the value of the object instance at any point in time. That is, as I point and click this, it's changing the state of the value in my object instance. When I view, when this thing is using dynamic binding to look at that value to determine whether it's editable or not. So if I enable, let's disable it, and I go here and I type my name, and I go to next, I can't edit this first step anymore. If I enable edit mode, then I can edit the step. So each step has this editable attribute, and it's bound to the is editable variable in my object component instance, which has that value that's bound to this attribute, this template snippet. So as you notice, each step has this. And so what I'm doing, except the last step, there's nothing to edit, so it doesn't have it. But one thing else to notice is that this particular example is defining the stepper as linear. So I can't move off of step 2 unless I go and edit this thing and define it a valid value. So I could go next now, and now I'm in edit mode, and I could disable edit mode and not be able to go back to the first step or the second step. So that's really the demo of an editable edit mode. Now, my experience has been in a lot of the companies, the sophisticated questionnaires, and they always want the user to go back and fix things. The other approach is to disable edit mode and have them step through, and then after they finish all the steps, show them a summary screen which is editable, and they could go in and edit it at that particular point in time. Because the bottom line is, after you, most likely if you have a sophisticated stepper, you got to show them a review screen anyway, so they could see all the information. At that point in time, they realize, oh darn, I did step 2 maybe incorrect, or I want to modify that step, and then I want to go back. So that's really all we wanted to talk about with the editable feature of the stepper. And so going back to the documentation, this particular example, all we did was discuss the editable mode. The only thing that came out of this that was a little bit interesting was that there was an additional icon showing up for a particular state that was used, a check which is like completed or done, and if you didn't do that, that probably wouldn't have happened. See, and notice you're done here. You can go back and edit it. You're done. You could submit all this data. These the mat steps have form groups with form fields that are valid at this point in time. So and that's only because the attribute linear was defined by default in this particular example. The form fields had to be validated, but you can go back and edit them to change, to change them. But it's required. It's validated. So that's the only difference we saw with the state of the icon showing a done or completed checkbox automatically without us having to do any work. So the out of the box icon, matte icons, and the state, and it working the way we wanted to was pretty straightforward. So let's move on to some more examples to see what other features that the matte material design stepper component have, and we'll go through each one of these step by step because it's important to realize and stay focused on the different functionality.